as you just saw, the view from my workshop here is beyond stunning. And because of that, it gives me just the greatest joy and inspiration to come out to the workshop and hang out with all my old tools that I've managed to collect throughout the last 12 months in France. And then I thought, well, why not do a bit of show and tell as well? So that being said, I'd like to release the suspense that's happening here now and provide you guys with what you've been waiting for. And that's to introduce you to my new old traditional woodworking tool, the marking gauge. So how to make a YouTube video interesting about a marking gauge. Well, let's have a go. Starting from the beginning, I used these in school when I was in woodwork class. And since then, I've never really seen or used them again. Now, fast forward many years, I found myself in Bordeaux at the end of last year at an antiques fair and come across this for maybe 10 or 15 euros. And yeah, because of my profound addiction to traditional woodworking tools in the last 12 months, obviously I snapped this one up and here we are doing a video about it. And I have to say, that's one good thing about France. Due to the age and the history of the country, it definitely lends itself to finding a lot of ancient sort of style tools that otherwise, I'd never find, well, never say never, but it would be more difficult to find in Australia. So that being said, a little bit about the marking gauge. They were invented in around the year 1600 by a Belgian engraver. Cannot pronounce his name, so don't ask me to. And obviously they've come a long way since then. I don't know how old this one is, obviously, but it is sort of more traditional, more of the traditional style. By and large, whether it's one that was made in 1600, this one, or one that's made current day, they by and large do exactly the same thing. And I should say that in terms of the guy that invented it, the Belgian guy, the engraver, I should put his name in the description, in my description of this video, so you'll be able to find it in there and try and decipher that for yourself. So let's talk this actual marking gauge and the components of the marking gauge. First of all, I'll just step back a little bit. First of all, we have, the way it works is you've got the beam that runs down the middle here, and inside the beam at the end is a small little pin or nail which does the scribing of the line, and I'll show you that shortly, so do not miss it. And on the beam slides the headstock up and down, and I'll show you how that works soon. And then when you get your distance from your pin to your headstock, you use your wedge and just push it in there, and it locks it in place so it doesn't move. So that's that. I think I'm just cutting my head off a bit with this thing, but that's okay. Yeah, so that's the marking gauge. And now let's put it to the test and see, so you can see how it works. So how this marking gauge works. First of all, I have with me my workpiece, in this case 18mm MDF, and I want to make a cut line down the board. So whatever your mark is, in this case I'll make it 50mm or 5 centimeters. And yes, I'm left-handed. One of 13 people in the world, 13% of people in the world are left-handed from my understanding. Anyway, back to the task at hand. And then all you do is remove your wedge like that so you can adjust. So you're effectively put the pin on the mark and just press it in a little bit just to score it in, and then run your headstock up to the edge of the workpiece. Press that in, and then you just turn and run your line. No need to go crazy hard. It's just a little scratch of the line there along the workpiece, nice and lightly, and that's it. The other thing, a little trick we can do with this is if we're marking this line, and I've just scribed this line on the board, by the way. If we're scribing this line and we don't want to go past this pencil line here, all we do is press the marking gauge into the point where you want to stop at. So you've got a hole there. You can see that small little hole there. And then when you run your marking gauge up to that point, it drops into the hole and doesn't go past. And that's it. So that's it. Now we know how to use a marking gauge and how to scribe a line with a marking gauge. But before I go, I'd just like to highlight a couple of benefits as to why a marking gauge is very useful when working with timber. First of all is accuracy. So you're probably wondering why you would not just use a pencil as opposed to a marking gauge or scribing a line in a piece of timber. The difference between a chunky fat pencil line and this is probably, you know, a couple of thousandths of an inch, as opposed to a pencil which can be quite chunky. So you know that where your mark is exactly where you need to be. And further to that, you can set this up perfectly with the fence and run it around the workpiece. And further to that, you can set this up perfectly and run it around the workpiece, which gives you the ultimate consistency when you're marking a line. For things like cutting the shoulder of a tenon, or marking out for the shoulder of a tenon cut, or marking out for dovetails. These sort of joins need to be perfect, and this will allow this a lot more than this. So reason number 2 is tear out. So when you scribe a line in timber and you're cross-cutting across the grain, by you scribing the line, you're effectively cutting through the top layer of the grain. So that then, when you saw through it with your saw, will reduce the likelihood of the wood splintering because you've already made that initial scribe into the wood, and then you're left with a clean, crisp line, which is always what you're after. So benefit number 3 are tool guides. So what I mean by tool guides, as an example, if you've scribed your line in the timber and then you want to use a chisel, you can then place your tip of the chisel into the actual little trough that the scribe line creates, and you know exactly that that's where it needs to be, as opposed to a little pencil mark where it might be a bit fatter and you're not sure exactly which side of the pencil mark it needs to be on, or whether it's in the middle, or so there's always that element of guesswork, whereas with the scribe line, you know, it's perfectly accurate every time. So it's starting to get late here now, guys, and as much as I could spend all night in the workshop with my marking gauge, I won't. The sun is setting at the chateau and I need to go inside. So I just want to say thanks for watching, thanks for being here, and yeah, appreciate the support. If you haven't already, hit subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. And yeah, I'll talk to you in the next one.